For 15 years, the man everyone called Sam the Janitor worked quietly at Green Tech Industries. Every morning he showed up before sunrise, long before most people arrived. He would sweep the hallways, empty the bins, polish the floors, and make sure the offices looked spotless before the first employees walked in. He didn't talk much. Some said he was shy, others thought he was just old and tired. But the truth was, Sam didn't mind the silence. He liked to listen, to the sound of the machines humming in the factory, to the laughter in the break room, to the voices of people who never noticed he was there. Most of the younger employees didn't even know his full name. To them, he was just the janitor, the man with the gray hair, kind eyes, and slow walk. He wore the same faded blue uniform every day, carried an old lunchbox, and drove a beat-up pickup truck that coughed smoke when it started. But there was something about Sam that didn't fit the picture of an ordinary janitor. His eyes were sharp. He paid attention to everything: the cracks in the floor, the faces of the workers, the way people treated each other. And though his hands looked rough and worn, there was a calmness in the way he moved, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The company had grown big over the years. Green Tech Industries was known for making industrial equipment, machines that powered construction sites, farms, and factories all over the country. It had hundreds of employees, a shiny glass headquarters, and a name people respected. At least it used to be that way. In the early years, people said the company was like a family. Workers felt proud to be part of it. They said the founder, a man named Samuel Green, treated his employees with kindness and respect. He started the business in his garage, worked hard, and built it from nothing. But after he retired due to health issues, a new CEO took over. His name was Richard Cole. Richard was sharp and ambitious. He liked expensive suits, fast cars, and being admired. Under his leadership, Green Tech became more corporate, more numbers, more pressure, and less heart. Slowly, people stopped smiling at work. The old spirit of the company faded. Sam had been there through it all. He saw things others ignored. He saw how workers who gave years of their life were suddenly let go to cut costs. He saw how the break room food got cheaper while the executive lunches got fancier. He saw safety rules broken to meet production deadlines. He saw the small signs of greed growing, one decision at a time. But he said nothing. Not yet. Every evening, after the day shift ended and the office lights went out, Sam stayed behind to clean the CEO's office. It was a big room with glass walls, a leather chair, and photos of Richard shaking hands with politicians and investors. On the shelf behind the desk were a few awards: Leader of the Year, Business Visionary Award, Outstanding Executive. Sam dusted them carefully every night, his expression unreadable. Sometimes he would pause at a framed photo that hung near the window. It was a picture of the company's early days, back when the building was small and the workers stood shoulder to shoulder in front of a handmade sign that said, Green Tech. In the center of that photo stood a much younger version of Sam himself, smiling proudly, with grease on his hands and hope in his eyes. Nobody ever looked closely enough to recognize him. He'd been away from the company for a while after he got sick. When he came back, he didn't want to return as the owner or the boss. He wanted to see what the company had become, not from the boardroom, but from the ground. So he put on the uniform, started sweeping floors, and let people think he was just another old man trying to make a living. At first, it hurt him to see how the place had changed. The workers were tired and anxious. The managers barked orders like drill sergeants, and the CEO, his own former protege, barely even looked at the people who made the company run. Sam had once trusted Richard. He had believed the man would protect what they had built. But as the years passed, he realized that the company he once loved had lost its soul. Still, he waited. He wanted to understand the problem from the inside. He wanted to see it through the eyes of the people who lived it every day. One evening, as he was mopping the hallway near the factory floor, a young technician named Daniel stopped to talk to him. Daniel was one of the few who treated Sam like a real person. "Hey, old man," Daniel said kindly. "You ever get tired of cleaning up after us?" Sam smiled. "Not really. Someone's got to keep the place looking good." Daniel laughed. "If you say so." But you've been here forever, right? 15 years, I heard. Something like that, Sam said quietly. Man, that's loyalty, Daniel said. I wish the higher-ups cared as much. My dad used to work here back when it was still good. He said the old owner was a legend, treated everyone like family. Sam's eyes softened. I heard he was a decent man. Daniel nodded. Yeah. Wish we had more like him around. Sam gave a small smile and went back to mopping. He didn't say what he was really thinking, that he was that man, and that he had no one to blame but himself for trusting the wrong people. Later that night, as he cleaned the cafeteria, Sam overheard two supervisors talking near the vending machines. Did you hear? Another 10 layoffs next week, one said. All lower-level staff. Management bonuses stay the same, though. The other laughed. That's business, man. The janitors and machinists don't make shareholders happy, Richard does. Sam's hand tightened on the mop handle, but he stayed silent. He had learned a lot about people by staying quiet. You learn what they really think when they believe you're invisible. He finished his shift after midnight. The halls were empty, the lights dim. As he locked the supply closet, he took one last look around. This company had been his dream once, a place where hard work meant something, where every person mattered. But now it was a machine with no heart. He climbed into his truck, the same one he'd driven since the early days. It rattled down the road toward his small farmhouse on the edge of town. The night air was cool, and the stars were bright. Sam liked driving at night. It gave him time to think. He thought about the first day he started the company. He was young then, full of ideas and stubborn determination. He remembered sleeping in the workshop, working weekends, selling his tools to make payroll. It wasn't just a business to him. It was a promise, to build something that treated people better than the world had treated him. Now, after all these years, he wondered where that promise had gone. When he got home, he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and an old photo album. The pictures showed the early team, smiling faces, long nights, victories that no one outside the company ever saw. In one picture, Richard stood beside him, much younger, shaking his hand after a successful deal. Sam had once believed that Richard would carry the same values forward. He couldn't help but sigh. Somewhere along the line, ambition had turned into greed, success had turned into control, and the company had turned into something he barely recognized. But as he flipped through the pages, an idea began to take shape in his mind. Maybe it wasn't too late to change things. Maybe it was time to remind people what green tech really stood for. The next morning, Sam went back to work as usual. No one noticed the quiet determination in his eyes. He swept, wiped, and polished, just like always. But deep down, he knew he was watching and waiting, for the right moment, the right reason to reveal who he really was. For now, he was just the janitor. The man no one paid attention to. The man they spoke freely around, unaware that the person pushing the mop was the same man who had built the company from the ground up. He didn't know exactly when that moment would come, but he knew it would come. Because he hadn't spent 15 years cleaning floors just to see his life's work destroyed. He looked around the hallway, the walls lined with photos of smiling executives and slogans about integrity and teamwork, words that had lost their meaning. Sam whispered to himself, "We'll see about that." And with that, he picked up his mop and got back to work. The next few months at Green Tech felt heavier than ever. Sam noticed the tension growing every day. It was in the way people walked faster down the hallways, the way the laughter in the break room had disappeared, and the way conversations stopped whenever a manager walked by. The company had become a place of fear. Workers were no longer proud. They were scared of losing their jobs. Every week there was a new rumor. Someone from the warehouse being let go, a whole department being restructured. Nobody knew what was really going on, and nobody felt safe enough to ask. Sam saw it all. He cleaned the empty desks of people who'd been fired. He picked up their forgotten coffee mugs, half-written notes, and family pictures left behind in the rush to pack up. Sometimes he'd stop for a second and stare at the photo of a smiling family, then quietly put it in a box and leave it on the manager's desk. It bothered him deeply. These were good people, hardworking, loyal, and honest. The kind of people who had built green tech from the beginning, and yet they were treated like numbers on a spreadsheet. He remembered how different things had been years ago. Back then, when the company was still small, everyone knew each other by name. They celebrated birthdays, helped each other when times were hard, and believed in what they were building together. Sam used to walk through the factory and shake every worker's hand. Now most of them didn't even know the name of the man who owned the company they worked for. One Friday evening, Sam was cleaning the main office floor when he saw something that stayed with him for days. The head of accounting, a woman named Laura, was sitting alone at her desk long after everyone had left. She was staring at a spreadsheet on her computer with a worried look. When she finally noticed Sam, she gave him a tired smile. "Long day?" he asked gently. "You could say that," she sighed. "They've cut our department's budget again. I've got 3 people doing the work of 10. Sam nodded. "That doesn't sound fair," she shrugged. "It's not. But around here, fairness doesn't matter anymore. As long as the top looks good on paper, no one cares what happens below." Sam didn't say much after that. He just kept sweeping, but those words stuck with him. As long as the top looks good on paper, that was exactly what was wrong. A few weeks later, he started noticing things that didn't make sense. New luxury cars parked in the executive lot, expensive renovations in the CEO's office. Yet at the same time, there were cost-cutting memos sent to every department. Less overtime, cheaper materials, smaller bonuses. One night, while he was cleaning near the finance room, he overheard 2 junior accountants whispering. "I saw the expense reports," one said. "There are payments going out to companies that don't even exist. Fake invoices." The other whispered back, "Looks like it, but we can't say anything." Last guy who asked questions got transferred out of nowhere. Sam quietly moved past them, pretending not to hear, but his mind was racing. Something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, he began paying closer attention. He cleaned slower near meeting rooms, listened to conversations, and noticed small details others ignored. The CEO, Richard, seemed to spend more time with investors than with his own employees. He spoke in polished phrases about growth and efficiency, but the factory floors told a different story. Machines broke down and weren't fixed. Safety checks were skipped. Workers complained about not being paid for overtime. And yet, every company report claimed record profits. One evening, Sam saw Richard leaving the building late, carrying a briefcase and talking on his phone. His tone was sharp and impatient. "I told you the board won't find out," Richard said as he walked toward his car. "Everything goes through the new vendor accounts." "It's clean," Sam froze. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but his instincts told him this wasn't good. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at his old company documents. He still had access to some legal papers that proved he was the majority owner, something only a handful of people knew. He had trusted Richard years ago, giving him full control as CEO while Sam stayed out of sight. But now he began to wonder if that trust had been a mistake. He remembered the day he first hired Richard. The young man had been full of ideas and energy, eager to take the company to the next level. He'd spoken about innovation and efficiency, about making green tech a national name. Sam had admired that ambition, but somewhere along the way, ambition had turned into greed. Sam still didn't want to believe that Richard could be corrupt. Maybe he was just under pressure making tough decisions, but deep down, something told him this went beyond bad management. A few days later, Sam was cleaning the executive conference room after a meeting. Papers were scattered across the table. He never liked to snoop, but one page caught his eye. It had the title, Asset Transfer Plan. The words underneath mentioned overseas accounts and company restructuring. He didn't take it, but he memorized what he could. That night he wrote everything down from memory, names, numbers, and words that didn't add up. Weeks passed. The situation at the company kept getting worse. Another round of layoffs hit the production team. Workers whispered about the company being sold. And through it all, Richard kept smiling, acting as if everything was fine. One morning, as Sam was mopping the lobby, he saw a group of investors touring the building. Richard led them proudly, showing off the new corporate lounge while pretending not to notice the broken machines in the background. When they passed Sam, the CEO gave him a quick glance and said, "Make sure the floors are spotless before our next group comes in." His tone was sharp, dismissive. The investors didn't even look at Sam. They just followed Richard, nodding at his fancy words. After they left, Sam stood there for a long moment, staring at the polished floor. He realized that the company's image was spotless, but its soul was filthy. That evening, something changed inside him. He decided he couldn't just stand by anymore. If green tech was really being stolen from the people who built it, he had to find out the truth and stop it. He began taking small steps. He started arriving earlier and leaving later, quietly watching and listening. He checked the trash bins near the executive offices, sometimes finding shredded documents that hinted at strange deals. He noticed that Richard often met with a lawyer from outside the company late at night. One night, while Sam was cleaning near the CEO's office, he heard voices through the slightly open door. "We'll finalize the sale next quarter," Richard said. "Once the assets are moved, we'll announce the merger. The old man won't even know until it's done." Sam's heart stopped. The old man. That was him. He backed away quietly, his hands trembling. He now understood everything. Richard was planning to sell the company behind his back, move the profits into private accounts, and leave everyone else with nothing. That night, Sam sat in his truck in the empty parking lot staring at the dark building. 15 years of quiet observation had led to this moment. He had built that company with his own hands, trusted people with his dream, and now they were trying to destroy it for money. He could feel anger rising in him, but it wasn't loud or wild. It was quiet, heavy, and certain. He knew what he had to do. He went home and opened an old wooden box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were the original company documents, proof of ownership, signed contracts, and the founder's certification that carried his name, Samuel Green. He looked at the papers for a long time. Then he whispered to himself, "You wanted to see what this place had become, Sam. Now you've seen it." He knew it wasn't enough to just expose Richard. He had to restore the company's heart. That meant protecting the workers, the honest ones who still believed in Green Tech's name. Over the next several weeks, Sam quietly gathered evidence. He photographed financial reports left in meeting rooms, copied suspicious invoices, and kept a journal of conversations he overheard. He didn't want revenge. He wanted justice. He started talking more to employees, asking small questions, learning their struggles. Many opened up to him because he was just the janitor, the one person they could trust. They told him about delayed payments, missing bonuses, and broken promises. Each story added another piece to the puzzle. The more Sam learned, the clearer the picture became. Green Tech wasn't just being mismanaged, it was being stolen from the inside. By the end of that month, Sam was sure of one thing: the company's future was in danger. And the only person who could save it was the one nobody saw coming: the janitor. He closed his notebook, locked it in his bag, and looked around the factory floor one last time that night. Machines hummed softly in the dark, and the faint smell of oil filled the air. "This was supposed to be a place of pride," he murmured. "It will be again." And with that, Sam turned off the lights and walked out into the night, ready to face what came next. Sam had always been a patient man. But now patience wasn't enough. The company he had built was falling apart, and the people he cared about were being hurt by the greed of one man. He had spent months watching quietly, gathering proof, and listening to what others didn't want to see. Now, it was time to act. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. One morning, while cleaning the factory floor, he saw Daniel, the same young technician who often stopped to talk to him. Daniel looked exhausted, his hands covered in grease, his uniform stained. Sam noticed the slump in his shoulders. "Rough day?" Sam asked. Daniel sighed. "They just told us there's going to be another round of layoffs. Probably next week. They say it's for efficiency, but everyone knows that's just a fancy way of saying they want to save money for the executives." Sam nodded slowly. "You're worried you'll be next?" "Maybe," Daniel said. "But honestly, I'm more worried about my dad. He's worked here for 25 years. This place used to mean something to him. Now he just feels useless. Says the company forgot about the people who built it." Sam looked down at the floor, his heart heavy. Maybe the company just needs someone to remind it what matters. Daniel gave a tired chuckle. If only someone up there actually cared. Sam didn't say anything, but inside he made a quiet promise. Someone does care. That evening, Sam stayed late again, pretending to mop the hallway near the executive offices. The building was mostly empty, but the lights were still on in the CEO's corner office. He could hear Richard's voice through the slightly open door. "I don't care what it takes," Richard said sharply. "The sale goes through next quarter. Once it's done, I'll be gone and they can deal with the mess themselves." A pause. Then another voice, a man Sam didn't recognize. "And the board? They won't know until the papers are signed. I've got the numbers fixed." On paper, it looks clean. Sam froze. It was worse than he thought. Richard wasn't just running the company badly. He was planning to sell it in secret and disappear with the money. Quietly, Sam pulled out his old flip phone. The camera wasn't great, but it would do. He pressed record and captured the conversation through the small gap in the door. He didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly, just waited until the men left the office. When they finally did, Sam stepped inside. He looked around the big room, the desk, the glass walls, the shelves lined with awards. It felt strange standing there in his janitor uniform. This used to be his office years ago. Back then it had been filled with blueprints, tools, and notes. Now it was just a display of power. He looked at the desk and saw a folder half open. The words "Confidential Company Transfer Agreement" were printed on the cover. He didn't take it, but he memorized every name and date he could. Then he left quietly, locking the door behind him. The next few nights, Sam worked like a man with a mission. He copied documents left behind in conference rooms, photographed notes from the whiteboards, and made a list of people he could trust. He knew he couldn't go to the board yet. Without solid evidence, Richard would twist the story and make Sam look like a bitter old man. So instead, Sam decided to learn everything he could from the people who really knew how the company worked. He started talking more to the workers. Not like a boss or a spy, just as a friend. He'd ask small questions while cleaning, listen carefully, and take mental notes. One afternoon during lunch, a maintenance worker named Tony sat beside him. "You hear they're changing the safety rules again?" Tony said, shaking his head. "Used to be we had 2 people on every heavy machine. Now they want 1. It's dangerous, man. But nobody wants to speak up." "They're scared." Sam's jaw tightened. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" 15 years, Tony said. "Started when the old owner ran things. Back then, you could talk to the boss like he was one of us. Don't know what happened after he left. Place hasn't been the same." Sam nodded quietly. "Maybe he never really left," he said softly. Tony frowned. "What do you mean?" Sam just smiled and went back to eating his sandwich. Each night when Sam got home, he wrote down everything he learned in a small notebook. He filled pages with times, names, dates, and quotes. He didn't want revenge, he wanted truth. Still, the pressure was heavy. Some nights he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was doing the right thing. He was old now, tired. Maybe it would be easier to walk away and let things fall apart. But then he'd remember the faces of the workers, the people who still believed in what Green Tech once stood for. He couldn't walk away from them. One evening, while cleaning near the accounting office, he saw Laura again, the woman he'd spoken to before. She looked even more worried than last time. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then said in a low voice, "Sam, I shouldn't say this, but something strange is happening with the company's accounts. There are millions being moved around, and I can't trace where it's going. When I asked my supervisor, he told me to stop digging." Sam stayed calm, though his heart was pounding. "That doesn't sound right," he said. "It's not," she whispered. "And I think someone's covering it up. I just don't know who." Sam gave a small nod. "Maybe keep copies of everything you can, just in case." She looked at him for a moment, surprised by his serious tone. Then she nodded slowly. That night, as Sam walked through the dark parking lot, he realized he wasn't alone in this anymore. There were people inside Green Tech who still cared, who wanted the truth even if they were scared to say it out loud. Over the next few weeks, Sam quietly built his circle of trust. Laura started sharing documents with him, printouts of financial reports and secret transactions. Daniel told him about unsafe working conditions and missing bonuses. Tony gave him the names of suppliers that didn't seem real. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. But the more Sam uncovered, the more dangerous it became. One night, as he was finishing his shift, Richard appeared in the hallway. His sharp suit and polished shoes made a loud contrast to Sam's worn-out uniform. "You there?" Richard said. "Janitor, right?" "Yes, sir," Sam said quietly. Richard looked at him for a moment. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" "Long enough," Sam replied. "Well, make sure you keep out of the executive areas after hours," Richard said. "We've had some sensitive discussions lately. Don't want any misunderstandings," Sam nodded. "Understood." As Richard walked away, Sam noticed something in his tone, a hint of suspicion. He had to be careful now. The next day, security cameras were added near the offices. New rules came down about cleaning schedules. It was clear Richard didn't trust anyone. But Sam didn't stop. He just adjusted. He cleaned earlier in the evening, acted slower, quieter, less noticeable than ever. And while everyone else thought he was just the janitor, he was building a case strong enough to shake the entire company. Then, one night, something unexpected happened. As he was cleaning the break room, Daniel came running in looking nervous. "Sam," he whispered, "you didn't hear this from me, but Richard's having a private meeting tomorrow. He's bringing some guys from the board and a lawyer. Word is he's finalizing the sale." Sam's chest tightened. This was it, the moment everything would change. He went home that night and spread all his notes and copies across the table. It looked like chaos, papers, photos, recordings, but to him it all made sense. Every lie, every hidden payment, every sign of betrayal was there. He stayed up all night organizing everything. By morning he had a plan. He would go to that meeting, not as the janitor, but as the man who built the company. He wasn't sure what would happen afterward. Maybe they'd laugh at him, maybe they'd throw him out. But he didn't care anymore. The truth mattered more than anything. Before leaving for work, he opened the old wooden box again and took out his founder's certificate. He ran his hand over his name, Samuel Green. He smiled softly. "Time to clean up one last mess," he said. When he arrived at the company that day, he walked through the doors like he always did, quietly, unnoticed. Nobody realized that the man with the mop was carrying enough proof to expose the biggest secret in the building. That night would change everything. The next morning, Sam arrived earlier than usual. The air felt heavy and his hands shook slightly as he placed his old lunchbox on the counter. Today wasn't going to be an ordinary day. The meeting Daniel had told him about was scheduled for noon in the big boardroom. Executives, board members, and a few lawyers would be there. It was the meeting that would decide the future of Green Tech, the company Sam had built with his own two hands. As he walked through the halls, people greeted him like they always did, with polite smiles or quick nods. To them, he was still just the janitor. But today, hidden under his plain uniform, he carried something no one expected: proof. Proof of lies, theft, and betrayal. He had spent the entire night sorting everything: the fake invoices, the recorded conversation, the bank transfers, and even the old founder's certificate with his name on it. Everything he needed to show who he really was, and what Richard had done. Around 10 in the morning, while cleaning near the lobby, Sam saw Richard walk in with his usual confidence. The man's expensive suit gleamed under the lights, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. He was surrounded by board members, shaking hands and smiling for show. Sam stayed in the background, mopping quietly, listening to every word. "Today's a big day," Richard said to one of them. "After this deal, Green Tech will be positioned for global expansion." "Impressive," one board member said. "And the founder's family? Any involvement?" Richard smiled slightly. "No need. The old man's long gone. We've moved forward." Sam's heart clenched, but he said nothing. He just kept working, pretending to wipe a small spot on the floor. When the group moved toward the conference room, he followed at a distance, watching as the doors closed behind them. The large frosted glass walls hid most of what was happening inside, but Sam could see the silhouettes. People sitting, papers being passed around, hands shaking. He knew this was his moment. He waited until the room was completely full, then slowly wheeled his cleaning cart toward the door. The receptionist looked up. "Oh, you don't have to clean there now, Sam. They're in a meeting." He smiled gently. "I know, I just need to take care of something important." Before she could respond, he opened the door and stepped inside. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at him, an old man in a janitor's uniform holding a mop. Richard's smile faded immediately. "What are you doing here?" Richard said sharply. "This is a private meeting." Sam took a slow breath. His voice was calm but firm. "Yes, I know. But I think it's time we all had a real conversation about what's been happening here. The board members looked at each other in confusion. "Excuse me," one of them said. Sam walked to the end of the table and set down a thick envelope. "You're about to sign away this company," he said softly. "But you should know the truth first." Richard stood, his face tightening. "You need to leave now." Sam met his eyes. "You've said that before to a lot of good people, but not today." He opened the envelope and pulled out several papers. "Before you continue this meeting, you should all take a look at these." He handed them to the nearest board member, who began to read. One by one, others leaned in, their expressions changing from curiosity to disbelief. "What is this?" one asked. "These are offshore transfers. Fake vendor names," another said. "And this signature, Richard, this is yours." Richard's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. He's lying. He's just a janitor." Sam looked at him calmly. "Maybe. But I've also been a lot of other things." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document, the original founder's certificate. He laid it on the table and said quietly, "My full name is Samuel Green, and I built this company from the ground up." The room went completely silent. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then one of the board members picked up the certificate, his eyes widening as he read the name. "Samuel Green," he said softly. "You're the founder?" Sam nodded. "Yes. I started this company in a small garage more than 30 years ago. I hired the first workers, built the first machines, and gave this company its name. And when I retired, I trusted Richard to take care of it. I thought he would protect it, not destroy it." Richard laughed nervously. "This is absurd. Anyone can forge a paper. He's just some old man pretending." "I'm not pretending," Sam interrupted gently. He reached into his bag again and pulled out more documents, old photos, signed contracts, and early blueprints with his name on them. "Everything here is real, and so is the evidence of what you've done to this company." He took out his phone and placed it on the table. "If you'd like to hear for yourself, here's a recording from 2 weeks ago, your voice, talking about selling green tech in secret." Richard's mouth opened, but no words came out. One of the lawyers pressed play. The room filled with Richard's voice. "The sale goes through next quarter. Once it's done, I'll be gone and they can deal with the mess themselves." When the recording ended, the silence was heavy. The board members looked at Richard with disbelief and anger. One of them finally spoke. "Is this true?" Richard tried to compose himself. "You don't understand. It was a strategy, temporary accounting moves, nothing illegal." Sam shook his head. "I've spent months collecting proof. You took the money that should have gone to the workers. You cut corners, ignored safety, and betrayed every person who believed in this company. You forgot what this place was built on." He looked around the table. "This company wasn't supposed to be about greed. It was supposed to be about people, about giving honest workers a chance to build something meaningful. But that spirit died when leadership became a game of numbers and lies." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "You have no authority here," he shouted. Sam looked at him steadily. "Actually, I do." He opened another folder and handed a document to the lawyer. "Here's the updated shareholder record. I may have stepped away, but I never sold my majority stake. Which means I still own this company. And as of this moment, Richard Cole, you're fired." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Richard's face went pale. "You can't do that." But before he could finish, one of the board members stood. "Actually, he can. If this is all legitimate, and it certainly looks like it is, Mr. Green is within his rights." Another added quietly, "I think we've heard enough." Sam didn't gloat or raise his voice. He simply gathered the remaining papers, slid them back into the envelope, and said, "I'll be reviewing the full investigation with the legal team. Anyone who was involved in these transfers will be held accountable. But the rest of you, those who still care about this company, I need your help to rebuild it." The room stayed quiet. Then slowly a few heads nodded. Sam turned to Richard one last time. "When I hired you, I believed in your potential. I thought you'd lead with honesty. Somewhere along the way, you lost that. I'm not angry, Richard. I'm just disappointed." Richard didn't respond. He just stood there, breathing heavily before storming out of the room. When the door closed behind him, Sam felt the tension lift. The board members began to talk quietly among themselves, reviewing the documents, asking him questions. Sam answered each one calmly. After a while, one of them looked at him and said, Mr. Green, I think we owe you an apology and a thank you. We didn't realize what was happening. Sam smiled gently. You don't need to apologize to me. Just help me fix what's broken. The meeting ended with a sense of shock but also hope. Word spread through the building quickly. Whispers in the hallways, stunned faces in the cafeteria. By the end of the day, everyone knew the truth. The quiet janitor was actually the founder. When Sam walked back through the factory floor, workers stared in disbelief. Some even clapped as he passed. But he just smiled humbly, saying, I'm still me, still just Sam. That night, after everyone had gone home, he stood alone in the same hallway he had cleaned for 15 years. The lights reflected off the polished floor, and for the first time in a long while, he felt peace. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, the hardest part is done. Now it's time to make things right. He looked at the old company logo on the wall, the one he had designed decades ago, and smiled. The janitor had finally taken off his disguise. And the man who once built Green Tech was back to rebuild it again. The next few weeks were filled with noise, movement, and whispers. News about what had happened in the boardroom spread through every corner of the company. People who had worked there for years were shocked to learn that the man who had been sweeping their floors and fixing the lights was actually the founder of Green Tech. At first, no one knew how to act around him. Some of the workers would stand up straight when he walked by, unsure whether to greet him or stay quiet. Others smiled nervously as if they were meeting someone entirely new. But Sam always gave them the same gentle nod, the same calm smile he'd given for 15 years. I'm still the same person, he would say. Don't start treating me differently. But of course things had changed. The board had launched a full investigation into the company's finances. Lawyers were sorting through piles of documents and files, following every trail Richard had left behind. It wasn't easy. Years of bad decisions had left the company in a difficult place. Low morale, high expenses, and broken trust. Sam spent every day walking through the factory, not as a janitor, but as a listener. He spoke to workers on the floor, asking about what had gone wrong, what could be fixed, what they needed to feel proud again. The workers were hesitant at first, afraid to speak too freely. But once they saw that Sam wasn't there to judge or punish, they began to open up. They talked about how safety had been ignored, how overtime pay was often delayed, and how some machines hadn't been serviced properly in years. Sam listened carefully, writing notes in an old notebook. He didn't have a secretary or a fancy tablet, just that same worn notebook and a pencil. After a week of listening, he called his first official meeting, not in the large boardroom, but in the factory itself. The smell of metal and oil filled the air as hundreds of workers gathered, their uniforms still dirty from a long shift. Sam stood on a small platform and spoke into a microphone. His voice was steady but kind. I started this company a long time ago, he said, and I built it with people like you. People who worked hard, who cared, and who believed in what they were doing. Somewhere along the way, things changed. Greed took over. Fear replaced pride. But I want you to know, those days are over. The workers listened closely, some with folded arms, others with cautious hope in their eyes. I made mistakes too, Sam continued. I trusted the wrong person. I stepped away when I should have stayed closer. But I'm back now and I'm not going anywhere. This company will not be sold. It will not be run by greed anymore. It will belong to the people who built it. You. A quiet murmur went through the crowd. He smiled softly. From now on, every voice matters here. We're starting an employee advisory team, made up of you, not executives. You'll help us make the right decisions, and together we'll rebuild this place the right way. Someone from the back shouted, Does that mean the pay cuts are gone? Sam chuckled. They're gone. Everyone's getting their fair wages back. And more importantly, we're restoring the safety program that was shut down. No one here should ever have to risk their life just to do their job. The workers clapped, not loud at first, but it grew stronger, claps turning into cheers. Some even had tears in their eyes. For the first time in years, the factory didn't feel like a place of exhaustion. It felt alive again. Days turned into weeks, and Green Tech slowly began to change. The management team was replaced with people who actually cared about the company. Old safety equipment was upgraded. Wages were restored. And the lunchroom, once quiet and dull, buzzed with laughter again. Sam didn't move into the CEO's office. Instead, he chose a small room on the ground floor, close to the workers. He said he didn't need a big desk to make a big difference. He kept the same lunchbox he had always carried and still took his breaks with the janitorial staff and machine operators. They found it strange at first, sharing sandwiches with their boss, but Sam always made them feel at ease. One afternoon, a young worker approached him. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Sam smiled. "Of course. Why did you stay a janitor for so long? You could have come back as the boss any time." Sam looked thoughtful. "Sometimes when you step away from something, you forget what it feels like for the people on the ground. I wanted to see things the way they see them, to understand what this company had become. I didn't want titles or power. I just wanted the truth." The young man nodded slowly. "You found it, didn't you?" Sam smiled again. "Yes, and it wasn't easy. But the truth always finds its way out." A few months later, the investigation into Richard's actions came to an end. The authorities confirmed what Sam had already known. Richard had stolen millions through fake accounts and shell companies. He was removed from all business positions permanently, but Sam didn't celebrate. He didn't want revenge. He wanted peace. When a journalist asked him for a statement, he simply said, "I don't believe in destroying people. I believe in rebuilding what they tried to break." That line went viral, and people across the country started sharing his story. A man who swept floors for 15 years only to reveal he was the owner all along. He became an example of humility and quiet strength, yet Sam stayed the same. He didn't do interviews or seek fame. He spent his days fixing problems, guiding people, and restoring trust. One evening, long after everyone had gone home, Sam walked through the empty halls of Green Tech. The lights hummed softly above, and the faint smell of cleaning supplies filled the air. He reached the janitor's closet, the one he had used for years, and opened it. Inside was his old mop still standing in the corner, along with a few rags and a bottle of cleaner. He smiled quietly. Those tools had once been his only companions. Now they were symbols of everything he'd been through. He picked up the old mop handle and whispered, "Thank you." Then he placed it back, closed the door, and walked away. When he reached his small office, he took out the old company badge he had worn as a janitor. The corners were scratched and the plastic was faded, but the name Sam was still clear. He placed it on his desk beside a new nameplate that read, "Founder and Chairman." Two names, side by side. Two versions of himself. The man who cleaned the floors and the man who built the company. He sat back and smiled. "I think I'll keep both," he said softly. A few weeks later, the company celebrated its 35th anniversary. The event was held in the same warehouse where it had all started, a modest building that had been repaired and decorated with banners and lights. Workers and their families filled the space, laughing, eating, and sharing stories. When it was time for Sam to speak, the crowd grew quiet. He stepped up to the small stage, microphone in hand, and looked at all the faces of people who had once doubted, feared, or lost hope. "I don't have a long speech," he began. "I just want to say thank you. Thank you for believing in this company again. Thank you for showing up every day and giving it your best. Green Tech was never about me, it was always about us." He paused, emotion filling his eyes. "I learned something important over the years. Power doesn't come from a title. It comes from people who care, who work hard, and who never stop believing in what's right. You are those people." Applause filled the room. Some people stood clapping and cheering, others wiping away tears. When the noise settled, Sam added one last thing. "I'm not going back to being CEO. That job belongs to someone younger now, someone who understands both the business and the people. But I'll always be here, not above you, not behind you, but beside you." The crowd erupted again, and this time, Sam let the moment wash over him. As the night went on, he walked through the crowd, shaking hands, hugging workers, laughing with their children. It felt like a family reunion more than a company celebration. When the lights dimmed and people began to leave, he stood outside the building, watching as cars drove away. The night air was cool and the stars were bright above the factory roof. He thought about everything that had happened, the years of silence, the lies, the heartbreak, and the final truth that had set everything right. He whispered softly to himself, "It was all worth it." Then he smiled, took one last look at the company he had rebuilt, and walked to his truck. The man who had once swept floors now swept through life with peace in his heart. And though his title had changed many times, in his soul he would always be the same, the man who never forgot where he came from.